It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome, folks. This is Steve Moore. This is the More Money Show, where we try to help you understand what's going on with politics. We try to help you understand what's going on with the economy. We try to talk about finances of the country, and we try to help you make more money. So I know we have so many loyal listeners, and I'm saluting you. Thank you so much for being a listener to our show and making it a success. My good friend John Katzimatidis, who is the owner of this great station, and by the way, this is the number one talk radio station in these United States of America. So it is such an honor to be able to have a show on this station. And we have affiliates throughout the country, by the way, and I know many of you are listening in other cities, and we are also online. So thank you all for joining. So much to talk. By the way, I missed you last week, folks. I missed you. I took a rare week off for 4th of July weekend, and it was like I felt a little empty about the fact that I hope you missed me too. But we've got a great show lined up today. We are on for 2 hours. And by the way, folks, we are live. This is live talk radio on a Saturday afternoon. You turn on all the other stations, you're just going to get recorded programs or recorded advertisements that are boring. We're going to have a lot of fun over the next 2 hours. I hope you will be able to stick with us. I have a great lineup of guests today, including one of my mentors and someone who really helped start my career. I'm talking about Ed Feulner, the esteemed founder and president of the Heritage Foundation. He is no longer the president. He retired a few years ago, but I just had lunch with him yesterday, and I said, Ed, you have got to come on my radio show and explain to our listeners what's going on with the conservative movement and what's going on with this Heritage 2025 project, which has come under some controversy. I was very proud to have contributed the tax an IRS chapter to that great document. So I'm really proud of that, but it's come under some heat. Donald Trump said, this is not my guide. And by the way, this wasn't meant to be Donald Trump's guide. This is a conservative vision of what the country could look like. And they've been doing it for 40 years and nobody does it better than Heritage. So I want to hear from Ed, and I think you'll really enjoy. And by the way, this guy goes back to, pre-Reagan era Republicanism. He knows what's happening in the conservative movement and the party and the economy better than anybody I could possibly think of. And then we are going to have my favorite senator in the entire United States Senate. And I hope he is yours too, Rand Paul from Kentucky, who is the fiscal conscience of our Congress. And boy, do we need that, because both parties are spending like drunken sailors. They're a bunch of fiscal pyromaniacs in Congress. And Rand Paul is like the only one who's actually come up with a plan how we can balance our budget. So we will hear from Rand Paul. And then my friend Hogan Diddley, who was the spokesman for Trump in his, I believe, last 2 years as president, is now working side by side with President Trump to help him get elected. He's also a colleague of mine at the America First Policy Institute. So it's an all-star lineup. But most importantly, more important than having Hogan on and Rand Paul on and Ed Feulner, we are going to be taking your calls, folks, throughout the show. And I'm going to give this number right now because I want to make sure, and we'll probably start taking your calls in about 20, 30 minutes at the bottom of the hour. The number, by the way, the More Money hotline number is 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. I hope we can get some new callers, and we have a lot of people call in frequently, and I love to hear from you all, but I'd love to hear from some new callers. And the question of the day, now here is the question of the day, folks. It is this. There's a big controversy now about whether Donald Trump or our president, Joe Biden, will handle the economy better. I don't want to talk about Joe Biden's mental fitness. That's not my thing. You all can make your own opinion about, whether you think he's mentally fit for office. I think the answer to that is pretty self-evident. What I want to ask you about is if you compare what Donald Trump achieved as president in terms of the economy, on jobs, inflation, on, helping build our businesses, the stock market, and then you compare that with what's happened under Biden, who do you think has done a better job? The polls show Trump has about a 10 or 12 point lead in the polls on handling the economy. But I'm especially interested in hearing from some of my Democratic friends and some of my liberal friends who intend to vote for Joe Biden. And I'd love for you to call in, because this is freedom of speech radio. I want to hear your opinion about why you think that Joe Biden would be better to handle the economy. I respect everyone's opinion. I don't always agree with everyone's opinion, but I certainly respect people, and I don't cut people off unless they ramble on. But for my Democrat and liberal friends, please call in. And I want you to give us a good, staunch defense of what Joe Biden has done to or for our economy. And that number, again, is 1-800-848-9222. Don't call in yet. Probably we'll start taking your calls in about 15 or 20 minutes. And I love it. It's my favorite part of the show, frankly, is hearing from you. I tell people all the time, people say, why do you take 2 hours out of your Saturday afternoon every week to do this show? And I always tell people, because I love my listeners and I love hearing from you. And I learn so much from listening to what you have to say. I believe in the common sense of the American people. We are a democratic country, although we are a representative country as well. We're not a democracy. It's not something like, 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner. But we do have such smart people in this country, and the wisdom of the American people cannot be matched by the wisdom of people anywhere else in the world. So I want your opinion, Trump or Biden, on the economy, not on foreign policy, not on mental fitness, not on abortion and other issues, on the economy. Who do you think has done a better job? All right. I want to talk for about 5 minutes before I bring on my good friend Ed Follner about what is going on with the media in America today. This is not usually my normal topic, and I am going to be talking about the economy more in the second hour. But here, listen to me on this, folks, because I think this is critically important. So if we look at what's happened, everyone knows that Joe Biden is mentally challenged right now, and he's getting older. No question about it. There's some rumors that he might have Parkinson's disease. I hope he doesn't. I pray that he doesn't. I want our president to be healthy. But everybody gets older. I'm older. I'm 64. I say this all the time. I don't have the same energy, probably the same memory as I did 20 or 30 years ago. It just happens. It's what happens to all of us. Some people get older faster than others do. I have 3 friends that are in their mid-90s that are amazing, that I cannot believe how physically and mentally healthy they are. But then I have friends in their early 70s that are losing it. And everybody, loses it at a different pace. So I'm not trying to be snide here, but I'm just saying that it's a truism that Joe Biden is losing it pretty quickly. And anybody who watched the debate knows that. So the question, my point of all this is not to attack the president. It's to attack the media. And listen up, folks, because this is my pitch for the day. The media covered up Joe Biden's mental infirmities, and they've been doing it for 4 years. 4 years. Now, that was also the Democratic Party establishment did this. But you can understand when they would do that. They're in it to win. They would say anything to win, and they tried to hide this from the American people. That's what the party would do if you want to elect your guy. But why did the media play along with this? Where were the watchdogs? Where were the people in the media to say, this dog doesn't hunt anymore? And this was true 4 years ago. Do you remember, folks, that the media had no problem with the fact that the Democrats stuck Joe Biden in the basement for a full year and he didn't come out? I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but remember, he did very, very few public appearances. He'd every once in a while stick his head out, like when he had to do the debate. But for the most part, he was the invisible man. And that was by design. The Democrats didn't want people to see what kind of mental condition Joe Biden was in. But the media knew this. They knew that he was not fully there, that he didn't have 52 cards in the deck. And yet they covered it up. And then it got worse and worse and worse just as he aged. When he became president, he probably wasn't mentally fit to be president in 2020, frankly. But then remember what happened when there was that famous incident where the special prosecutor interviewed Joe Biden about this issue with respect to what happened to these confidential files. And what the prosecutor said was, I can't prosecute Joe Biden because he is not really mentally fit. He can't remember what happened. So a jury would never find him guilty because he can't remember what happened. And the Democrats went crazy. Oh my God, how dare he say that's such a political thing? And the media basically piled on and said, oh yes, this was just a political decision. He's mentally fit. They knew he was not mentally fit. Then about 2 weeks before the debate that happened, Joe Biden took a rare trip abroad and showed his face in public. And he had meetings with all the European NATO leaders and the G8 leaders. And they all said the same thing. After those meetings were over, hello, this guy is really losing it pretty quickly. And they didn't have an incentive or bias to say that. They liked Joe Biden, but they said, hey, America, pay attention. This guy is really having a problem completing a full sentence and remembering just about anything. But the media covered that up too. They covered it up. They knew for at least 2 or 3 or 4 years that Joe Biden was not mentally fit to be president, and they said nothing. This is one of the greatest cover-ups since Watergate, except what Watergate was exposed by the media, and this was something that was actually, they were complicit in this, the media. They knew this, and they didn't jump on Biden and start exposing him until after the American people saw it with their 2 eyes. They saw the debate and they realized, oh my God, this guy can't possibly be president. And then the media said, okay, yeah, we got to get rid of this. And now they want to throw him over the boat. But where have they been for the last 4 years? Where were the watchdogs? And the reason this is important, folks, is that you cannot believe a single word the media tells you. You just can't. They lie. They lied to the American people for years and years and years, and they should be held accountable for that. If I sound a little angry, I am, because the media should not be politically biased. They should be giving us the truth. They should be the ones sniffing this stuff out, and they didn't tell us what was going on. And so here's the most amazing part of this. Now all the Democratic leaders want to get rid of Joe Biden. Of course, they want to get rid of Donald Trump too, because they are hyperventilating that Biden has crashed in the polls. And so the same people who told us, oh, we have to have a democratic process, and Trump is a danger to democracy. How many times have they said that? 1,000 times. He's a danger to our democracy. Well, think about it. The Democratic establishment told all the American people, the Democrats, to go out and vote for Joe Biden in the primaries. Joe Biden got millions of votes, not many votes for anybody else. They chased everybody else out of the field, and they said, okay, Joe Biden's going to be our man. And yet, now that Joe Biden is a liability, they're saying, oh, we have to get rid of Joe Biden. They said, we have to get rid of Joe Biden. We're going to put somebody else in. And Biden's correct on this. He said, wait a minute, I won the votes. I'm the one who should decide whether I'm leaving, not you people. This is so what they want to do now is have a smoke-filled room like they used to do in the 19th century with a bunch of the party hacks deciding who the major party nominee is going to be. And I'm sorry, I have a big, big problem with that. I think this is one of the great conspiracies of our time. And I think Joe Biden won fair and square. He should be the Democratic nominee. Put him up and let's see what happens. That's my view. But again, the villain here is not Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden's a villain for many things that he did to our country, but not because of his declining mental health. The villain is the media and the Democratic establishment that tried to cover up this. This was the biggest cover up in American history, bigger than Watergate, folks. That's what's happened here. And I want to get that out because These people are so self-righteous. Now that Biden is a liability, they want to get rid of him. I guarantee you, by the way, if he were 10 points in the lead right now in the polls, they wouldn't say we got to get rid of him, despite the fact that he's mentally challenged. All they want to do is win because all they care about is power. Okay, we're going to take a 1-minute break, and then we will be back with my good friend, Ed Follner, the former president and founder of the Irreplaceable Heritage Foundation.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio, the number one talk radio station in these United States of America. I will be taking your calls in about 15 minutes. The question of the day is on the economy, not on abortion, not on social policy, not on foreign policy, on the economy. Who do you think has done a better job building our economy? Would you say it's Joe Biden or would you say it's Donald Trump? And I want to hear from some of my Democratic friends. I want to hear you. If you think it's Biden, explain to me how you think Biden has done a better job on the economy than Trump. I don't think you have much of a case, but I will listen respectfully to your opinion. That number, the More Money hotline, 1-800-848-9222. Okay, so now I am so privileged to introduce to you folks my mentor, my friend, a guy who I really learned so much about the economy and politics and policy from. And I'm talking about Ed Follner, who was the founder of the Irreplaceable Heritage Foundation, which was, I think it's 51 years old right now. They just had their 50th anniversary, which is incredible. And Ed gave me my first, my first job in policy was at the Heritage Foundation. I was, I think, a 23-year-old pimple-faced kid, and Follner gave me the opportunity to come on, and it's been a whirlwind ever since. Ed Follner, thanks for joining.
Steve, it's wonderful to be with you on WABC, and I look forward to our conversation. Thanks for having me.
So, Ed, it was 50 years ago. What, 51 years ago? Well, how long? When was Heritage started?
Yep, 1973. Yeah.
So congratulations, by the way. This was the first real impactful think tank. And back then, Ed, I think you've told me this before, back then there were a few think tanks like the Brookings Institute and a few others, but they were all more on the liberal pro-government side. And I guess, isn't it true that Heritage was really the first conservative pro-free market think tank in America?
Well, there were others around, Steve, like my good friends out at the Hoover Institution, where I was to be an early fellow, but they weren't actively involved in the policy process.
Right.
You know, they weren't down here in Washington watching what's going on and coming up with alternative views and alternative directions. So they were interesting and doing what think tanks do, as Senator Marco Rubio said the other day, putting forward ideas, but not really plugged in.
So it's been an incredible run. Tell me a little bit about, really what put Heritage on the map, of course, was that Heritage became Ronald Reagan's think tank. He even said that. This is the think tank I use. And that was an exciting period. I remember I didn't get there till 1983 or 84, but you put out this document called Mandate for Leadership in 1980, and that became kind of the blueprint for the Reagan administration.
It really did, Steve. We were very proud when we had worked with people on the campaign side, and they said, hey, we've got to focus on getting elected. What should we be doing on the policy side?
Right.
Follner pulled together some people to do this, and so we did, and we're very proud when Ronald Reagan passed out a hardbound copy of our book to every member of the cabinet at their very first cabinet meeting on January 21, 1981.
I remember some of the stories that people would tell me about how, when Reagan won, you had to even just Xerox off some of the chapters and get it to people as quickly as you could, because there was kind of, always that chaotic period between the election and the transition and swearing in of the new president. And I know from firsthand, folks, that, having been in meetings with the people in the Reagan administration, they took what we were. They didn't always follow our advice, but they listened to our advice, and oftentimes they did. And so that was a great success, and congratulations on what you did to you helped make the Reagan administration great.
Well, thank you, Steve. And it was because of the ideas of people like you, like our good mutual friend Art Laffer and others, in terms of how to move the economy forward. That's why I'm so excited to be on your program talking about economics and what sensible economic policy should be for the United States, both for the government, but what the government then enables the private sector to do, which is what it should really be all about.
So you are one of the few people, I actually am one of the few people too, that I was just out at the Reagan Library just about 3 weeks ago. And, you know, we Reaganites are getting older, that's for sure. But you and I and a few others, you know, had the privilege of working for the two greatest presidents of the last 50 years. And that would be Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. You ran the transition for Trump, which is a critically important period. You knew Reagan, you knew Trump. I'm writing a book now called The Trump Economic Miracle, and I talk in the book about how there were similarities between Trump and Reagan. They were different in many ways. They're different in many ways, but tell me about, you know, how you see Reagan and how you see Trump, and do you see any similarities between the two?
Oh, yes, happily, Steve. You're absolutely right. I was involved in both transitions, both the transition from Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan and from Obama to Donald Trump, where I headed up his domestic policy program from 2016 to early 2017 on Inauguration Day. And they were both very exciting times. And some of the similarities, both of them had as one of their central themes of their administration the need to reduce the role of the federal government, which you do first and foremost by cutting taxes. Yes, you do it by deregulation, but deregulation is kind of a one step at a time, whereas a tax cut can be a really big signal to the whole population and the whole economy. Hey, this is a new guy in town, and we're going in a different direction. Right. And it was so exciting when Donald Trump asked me to head up that domestic policy thing, and we started working on a new tax bill that, frankly, would take the then goofy corporate tax rate from one of the highest in the industrial world, which was forcing American companies to re-headquarter overseas because they didn't want to pay all these exorbitant taxes here when they could get away in Ireland or someplace else overseas at a much lower rate. Right. So that 2017 Trump tax bill, some of which unfortunately is going to be expiring in 2025, and we've got to make sure that gets renewed because otherwise the United States is once again going to find itself as the short man out. But as you well remember too, and you were a little bit at the tail end, but by the time the Reagan tax bill came into effect and the tax, we had what Art Laffer and others have called the 60 greatest months of prosperity in modern American history under Reagan and into George H.W. Bush.
Yep, it was amazing. The boom. It was one of the great booms in history. You're exactly right about that in terms of jobs. And we had quarters, you know, where the economy grew 6, 7, 8%, which is something we haven't seen in a long time in this country. You're right. Now on the tax, I agree with you on the taxes. What about just in terms of their, you know, their disposition? You know, I say in the book, and I wonder if you agree with this, you know, one thing about Reagan and Trump that you knew Reagan much better than I did. I only met him once or twice, but I watched him, and I love to go back, by the way, Ed, and watch those old videos of Reagan. They send a chill up my spine. I get so excited about it. But Trump loves people and Reagan loved people. And, you know, Trump loves to get out there in the campaign and talk to real Americans and truck drivers and nurses and plumbers. And, you know, and Reagan was sort of the same way, wasn't he?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. You recall, Steve, that Ronald Reagan didn't really like to fly. I mean, he had to once he was president of the United States, but he used to take trains. And he would just bring along books and read books. I remember one time on the train, one time after he was governor, when he was about ready to get involved in running for president. So it would have been like 1977. Yeah. I had the honor of calling on him as the new president of Heritage and saying, wanting to meet with him. I was invited into his home in California, and his staff person said, "Why don't you wait here in the library? He'll be down in a minute and be with you." I went in. and I looked at some of the books in the library, and I immediately spied one of my intellectual heroes, Friedrich von Hayek's Road to Serfdom, published 1944. I had the audacity. I pulled it off the bookshelf. I opened it up, and wow, there were Ronald Reagan's handwritten notes in the margin of
that's
Hayek's
amazing.
1944 book. Well, fast forward, 1986, it was my great pleasure and honor to take our visiting fellow, Friedrich von Hayek, in to meet Ronald Reagan. And Reagan was just so excited to meet Friedrich Hayek. I think one of the greatest economists of the 20th century, if not the greatest.
Yeah.
And his intellectual hero and my intellectual hero. So anyway.
It's funny you should mention that, Ed, because I remember that when Hayek came over to Heritage, and I remember being on the elevator at Heritage, and the door opens up, and who walks in but Friedrich von Hayek, and I almost fainted, and that guy, he was, amazing, and he was a delightful person. He had a little twinkle in his eye. He was like the Bill Buckley. I mean, there was something magical about that man. And so I do remember him coming over. Well, Ed, can I keep you over one more segment, because I want to ask you about Project 2025.
But Steve, unless any of your viewers think that, or your listeners rather, think that Hayek was just some goofy conservative economist, he won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah,
for the work
he
that
did.
He did in theoretical economics.
And
he was widely respected.
He was, and he was the first real conservative economist, because it had always gone to liberal pro-government. He was the first anti-big government economist to win the Nobel Prize. And then, of course, they had to give it to Hayek. And then, of course, they had to give it to Milton Friedman. And I think it's a contest, Ed, about those two, who was the greatest economist of the 20th century. But I loved them both. Can I keep you over for one more segment, Ed?
Of course, happily.
Okay, folks, we're going to take a quick break. I'm talking to my hero, my mentor, one of the great conservatives in our country, Ed Fulner, and we will be back in 1 minute. This is WABC Talk Radio. It's the More Money Show.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Ed Fulner on the line, and Ed, before we've been talking about the past, and that's been a fascinating conversation. I want to talk about the future a little bit, but before I do, I just want to say something that I think among the many great things about Heritage, as I've always called it, a training center for great scholars. Because one of the things that was unique about Heritage, and still is you're taking young people like me. I was fresh out of college, and you're training them to be policy analysts, and then they're all over, either in Congress, they're in the Senate, they are in state capitals, they are oftentimes close advisors to the president. So you must be very proud of that. I think it's one of the greatest achievements of all of Heritage. It's these hundreds of people who are now running the country.
Well, thank you for saying that, Steve. I used to say, we don't buy reputations at Heritage to work for us. We build reputations.
Yes.
People who come to work for us. And that's a big difference. We have to add and multiply to our numbers, and we have to continue to do that and not get all hung up on how, dividing and subtracting and how many angels dance on the head of a pin in the old philosophers' terms. Let's figure out where we can work together and how we can build things bigger and better.
So let's now talk. Great. So let's talk now about Heritage has come under some controversy of late because of a project called Project 2025, which is really sort of the mandate for leadership that you were talking about that started in 1980. And I'm not sure I exactly understand the controversy. I know Trump sort of distanced himself from some of the ideas in that, but I mean, look, Reagan distanced himself some of those ideas in 1980 as well. But it seems like, I was very proud to I co-wrote the chapter on the IRS and the Treasury and the tax code. And I think it's a fantastic blueprint. We called for a flatter tax, and I know Trump is not a flat tax fan, but we were, as I understand it, Ed, we're trying to put out a blueprint for what a conservative president should do.
Absolutely, Steve. And I actually, when my successor as president at Heritage, Kevin Roberts, conceptualized this plan with his great staff now at Heritage, he asked me to write kind of the final chapter, which I did. And it's in the bound volume. And in it, I go back and I recite the history of what the whole Mandate for Leadership series has been all about for more than 40 years now. And in it, I remind people that at the end of 1 year, Ronald Reagan, we were able to give him a very good grade because more than half of the specific 2,000 plus recommendations we made for Reagan were either already implemented or in process of being implemented or being at least discussed very seriously. And this was when you had the opposition party in charge of both houses of the Congress.
Right.
And so we were really making some progress. Well, Trump comes along and he was we had our mandate for leadership in 2016 available to him and to the team. And as I say, I worked on as chair of his domestic policy in the transition period. So we were very much on the inside. We were working on it. Mm-hmm. And that was, we very clearly proposed and were as helpful as possible in terms of outlining what became the 2017 tax bill, which Trump very rightly describes as the largest and greatest tax cut in the history of the United States. Right. And thank you, President Trump. And in fact, President Trump, who today is kind of, as you say, distancing himself from Project 2025, I remember him saying in 2018 at a major heritage event that he was very pleased that Ronald Reagan had done 50% in the first year, but he was better than Reagan because he did 62%.
That sounds like the Trump I know. You know, in the many meetings that I've been in with Donald Trump, oftentimes with Art Laffer, I think it's really fascinating. Trump has a fascination with Reagan, and I think Trump kind of holds out Reagan as a model. And I'd say, Ed, that there's no better role model for Trump than Ronald Reagan. Amen
on that score. And Ronald Reagan was very realistic too, not only in terms of the economy, which is what you and I are focused on, but in terms of national security. He expected our partners to pull their own weight. And yes, he wanted peace through strength and real freedom around the world. But it wasn't going to all be a burden on just the taxpayers of the United States of America. It was going to be free people all around the world working together. And I think that's what and Trump, I think, came to realize this. As you know, Steve, I've been very involved in Asia particularly. And he did great things in terms he was ahead of Biden in terms of pulling Korea and Japan together. Yep. Still after their animosity of 35, 40 years after World War II. And so a lot of the foreign policy success that we're seeing today, particularly in Asia, really was very, very much attributable to Trump and what Trump laid the groundwork for with guys with a very strong team like Mike Pompeo and the others. But back to the economy, he's got so much work to do now. I mean, Steve, 4 or 5 years ago, we were so proud. America was not only energy independent, we were the world's largest producer of energy. Where are we now? Come on, guys. We're buying energy from Iran, from Venezuela. What kind of nuttiness is this?
Well, and we've only got a minute or two left, Ed, but when I was thinking about this, when I first did our first budget, remember we used to do the slashing the budget project at Heritage. I think they, still do that 40 years later. But at that time, the national budget, remember that Reagan introduced the first $1 trillion budget. So we had $1 trillion budget and the national debt was just a little bit over $1 trillion. Here we are today, and we've got a $7 trillion budget. And we got a $35 trillion debt. So I think we have a lot of work to do, Ed.
We really do. And for me, a senior citizen, Steve, I'm not very proud of the fact what I'm handing on to my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren in terms of national debt and obligations that we didn't confront sufficiently when we were in charge. And gosh, we got to do better this time.
We do. Well, Ed Fulner, thank you so much on a Saturday afternoon for taking some time. That's Ed Fulner, who is the esteemed former president and founder of the Irreplaceable Heritage Foundation. Folks, we'll be right back taking your calls, 1-800-848-9222. Do you think that Trump or Biden has done a better job on the economy, not on social issues, not on foreign policy, on the economy? Who did a better job? We'll be right back.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
We're back, folks. This is Steve Moore. Boy, I'm just so excited about having Ed Fulner on the show. We get the best guests. I'm just going to go out and say it. I'm not the greatest radio talk show host, but I do get some of the greatest guests on, and Ed Fulner is a statesman and a hero. So I'm going to take 2 of your callers now. I'm going to try to squeeze 2 in before we get to the Paynes, who we're going to talk about the financial markets. And then if you're on hold, you can either call back later or because at the top of the hour, I'll take some more calls. The question of the day, and we only have 5 minutes, is who's better on the economy, Trump or Biden? And let's go to Louise.
Hi, Mr. Moore. I listen to you every week, you and Mr.
Thank you. Yay.
Yeah, I do. But one thing I don't hear any economists talk about, first of all, I think Trump did a fantastic job. At least I could eat then. Economists have the middle class and the working poor, but I never hear the category retired people on fixed income. And I'm still taking. Every 6 months I'm increasing my distribution, which means my taxes are going up. To pay on them, and I will run out of money if I keep doing that.
So, Louise, by the way, before I let you go, I'll answer your question, but do you think Trump or Biden's done a better job on the economy?
Oh, Mr. Trump all the way. Like I said, I could at least afford food.
All right, Louise, thanks for calling. I'll answer your question now. I think you raise a great point. We don't focus, and I'm guilty of this myself, we don't focus enough about retirees and the fact that they're getting crushed by inflation. Your pension plan gets crushed, your 401k plan gets crushed, their Social Security doesn't take you far enough because the cost of living adjustment does not fully take account of the runaway inflation under Biden. And so I am hoping that senior citizens will see what's going on here and will opt for Trump, because he has done a much better job in terms of the real incomes of people, and the 401k plans have been clobbered. People have lost $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in their lifetime savings because of this runaway inflation under Biden. Louise, great call. Let's try to squeeze in Dave from New York, and then we'll take a break.
Hi, no question that Trump has been much, much better for the economy. But here's my question.
Wait, hold on, Dave. So you think Trump better on the economy than Biden? In what way do you think Trump has been better?
Well, lower regulation, lower taxes.
Yes.
Certainly a better atmosphere of the country, taking care of everybody, not just one sector.
Okay. All right. Good answer, Dave. Okay. What's your question?
Okay, when I go to the supermarket, when I go to the Home Depot, when I go out to eat in a restaurant, the prices are so high, I can't see how the average American is doing anything, even a new car. I'm 80 years old, so I've saved. I have plenty of money for my needs. I'm not a multimillionaire, but I could afford it. But I feel very sorry for the average American, and I feel it's got to cause a tremendous slowdown in the economy. I mean, I went to a fast food place with my girlfriend the other day, and it was $30. I mean, for nothing.
So wait, Dave. Dave, you're how old did you say you're 80?
I'm gonna be 80 next month.
Oh, well, first of all, congratulations. And you sound of sound mind. You sound a lot better than Joe Biden does. And you have I'm proud of you. You have a girlfriend at age 80. So I hope.
Yes.
What's her name?
Ellen.
Okay, well, tell Helen we said hello. And I think you're exactly right. Dave, you make a really critical point, and it's something I've talked about on the air week after week, which is the real inflation rate. The inflation rate that you pay when you pay your groceries, when you pay for your rent or mortgage, when you pay your insurance fees. I mean, I was telling my wife the other day, because my wife is the one who actually does the bills in our house, and
right.
She's a saint. She has to do all the bills, and she gets so mad at me. She said, "Why do you keep going on these shows saying prices are 20% more?" And then she shows me the bills, and they're like 30% more, 40% more, in some cases 50% more. And I don't think that these statistics, Dave, are actually realistically reflecting what people are paying. And look, the bottom line here, Dave, is the average family is $2,000 poorer today than they were when Biden came into office because of this high inflation. And so, Dave, it's a great point. Congratulations on reaching your 80th birthday, which is coming up. I hope you'll call back when you reach 80. What a milestone that is. Folks, we will be right back. We are now going to go to our segment that we do every week, where my two friends, Bob and Ryan Payne, talk about what's happened financially this week, how you can make some money in the markets. These are two of the best in the business. We'll be right back.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
We're back, folks. This is the More Money Show and our new 2-hour segment every Saturday afternoon on WABC Talk Radio. We are on from 1 o'clock to 3 p.m. every Saturday. Last week, I missed you all. I took a week off. I'm sorry. It was 4th of July weekend. I won't do that again. I missed you. I hope you missed me. And it is great to be back in front of the microphone and to talk to you all. And by the way, we have a couple people holding. Phil and Edward, please hold on. I'll be with you in a minute because we didn't get to you in the last hour, but I do want to hear your views. I'm taking kind of a poll of whether people think that Trump or Biden has been better on the economy. Biden says he's got a better record. Trump says he has a better record. I know where I stand. I think on almost all the issues, I think Trump has objectively achieved better results, but I want to hear from you all, and I'm really desperate to hear from some of my Democratic friends. Come on, give it to me. I want to hear how it is that you think Biden has been better on the economy. We will be very respectful of your opinion. We are freedom of speech radio. We don't censor people. That's what the left does. We don't censor or censure people for their opinions. And so I will get to your calls, Phil and Edward, in just a minute. But I want to make one quick point before we get to this end of the hour show, the last hour. And by the way, we're going to have Ron Paul on later in the hour. He's the most important. I think he's the best senator we've got. He's the best guy in Congress. He is the fiscal and financial and conservative libertarian kind of North Star of Congress, and he is the indispensable man. But I wanted to bring up one quick point. How many of you are working in the office? If you're still working, I know we have a lot of retirees and a lot of students who listen to the show, but if you're of working age, if you're between the age of 22, let's say, and 65, you're probably working. And, are you working? Are you telecommuting now? Are you working in the office? Are you coming in sometime and not other times? I have to say I've gotten into the mode of working maybe a couple of days of work at home, and then usually 1 or 2 days on the roads traveling. But then, 1 or 2 days of the week I'm in the office. But I do come into the office at least once a week. And what we found from this new study, Federal News Service on federal employees, is that only 6%, only 1 out of every 16 federal employees is actually working full-time at 40 hours a week in the office. And by the way, these are people who make $100, $125, $150, some cases $200,000, and they're not reporting into work, at least not full-time. Many of them, I think I've seen estimates 30 or 40% of them don't come in at all. Now, we have to take their word for it that they're working, but, we know the productivity of the government is not very high. And I have to say, I have friends, and my wife has friends who work for the federal government, and they're just phoning it in. And they're really working only 20, sometimes 30 hours a week for a 40-hour-a-week job. They're making a big salary, and they're ripping off taxpayers. And so I'm sorry, I have a problem with that. And you go into these federal office buildings, and I'm in Washington, D.C., I'm in the swamp, and you go into these cavernous, gigantic, huge buildings. I've never seen anything so large, that are almost a city block long and wide. And you go through the halls of these office buildings, they're empty. They're empty. You can't, hello, is anybody in here? It's like you're there at midnight, and, maybe you'll find one or two people. By the way, this is also true of the Pentagon, for goodness sakes. The bureaucracy is so damn large. And so why am I bringing this up? Because we're trying to find ways we can cut the budget. How about we just sell some of these federal office buildings? If they're not going to come into work, let's sell them. We could get millions and millions of dollars by selling them off. And then if workers aren't coming in at least part-time to the job, let's get rid of them. I mean, how many of you knew that these workers are not coming to the office? I'll bet most of you didn't know. I didn't know this. And I mean, I knew that the roads were clearer than they used to be pre-COVID. And by the way, COVID ended 3.5 years ago. So they're still not coming into the office. There is an order by the president to come back in, to get back on the job, and they're not doing it. And so I say, fire them. Let's cut the federal workforce by 1/3 and save billions of dollars. We're running a $2 trillion deficit, so we have to save money. Let's downsize the government. I'm going to tell Donald Trump the next time I see him, let's have reductions in force, which is what any company losing money would do. You cut your expenditures, but that's not something Washington ever does. 6%, 6% are coming into the office full time. What a disgrace. And by the way, the cabinet officials, the people who run the agencies aren't even coming in. So there's not even anybody guarding the store. It's an unbelievable situation. Okay. I'm going to very quickly get to a couple of people who have been very patiently holding on the line. The question, of course, is who is better for the economy? Not on social issues, not on abortion, not on, foreign policy. Who is better on the economy? I think we have Phil on from New Jersey. Phil, are you still there? Oh, Bob from New Jersey. Oh, okay. What about Edward? Do we still have Edward? Edward from Tampa.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I do. By the way, Are you in Tampa?
Okay. Yes, I'm in Tampa, yes.
Well, thank you for, how are you getting the show? Are you listening online?
I'm listening on iHeart, yes.
Oh, thank you for listening. And what do you think? Who's better on the economy?
Yeah, Trump all the way. Here's some outside factors. You have empty commercial buildings. Now the residents are going to carry a higher tax burden. You have retail theft. That's going to cause prices to go up with inflation. And recently you had AT&T data leak. That's going to compromise people's financial,
I saw that.
Yeah, all that, yeah.
These records, these financial records, they're being kept by these private companies and by government are being hacked, folks. And your privacy is very much in danger. And I'm not so sure I'm an expert on what to do about that. But I got to tell you, I am very nervous about hackers and others, getting hold of our private financial information. It is a very scary situation. I need to get somebody on the air who's an expert on this to tell us what to do. And by the way, if any of our listeners are an expert on what do we do about all this hacking of these databases, I would love to hear. But do you have any thoughts about it? I guess Edward dropped off, but he's raising a really good point that, we have all these records. And incidentally, the thing that worries me the most is the federal government is gathering all this data about us. And even the census, the census was really meant to count how many people there are. And that's in the Constitution. We have a 10-year census. But why does the census have to know how many bathrooms you have, how many light fixtures you have, what kind of car you drive? All of these things, I don't know. I have a real problem with the government knowing too much about us. I'm a libertarian, folks. I want a government that is small, that leaves me alone, that gives us the vital services that we need. I want police protection. I want fire protection. I want a strong defense. I want roads and bridges. But I don't want the government telling me what kind of car I drive. I don't want the government telling me whether I can buy an air conditioner. I don't want the government knowing if I do buy an air conditioner. We have one of the most intrusive big brother governments in the history of this country today. And Biden is talking about, if he is reelected, two things that he wants to do that you should be aware of that I think are hugely frightening. Number one, he wants to move to zero fossil fuels. You cannot use oil, you cannot use gas, you cannot use coal under this mandate that Biden has come in, and he will enforce this if he's reelected. Folks, today we get 82% of our energy from oil, gas, and coal. And they want to take, by the way, then we get, most of the rest of it is from nuclear power. We get a tiny, tiny sliver of our energy from wind and solar power and from batteries. It's a very small amount. These lunatics want to try to take that to 100%. They're going to dismantle the economy. They're going to destroy our industrial base in this country. You can't run factories. You can't make steel and cars, and you can't run the internet and all of the new advanced artificial intelligence without a very large supply of energy. They're going to cripple this country. Maybe they were trying to do it intentionally, because you take away a country's energy supply and the economy collapses. It will collapse, folks. I know. I lived through the 1970s. Look what happened when the Arabs put the embargo on American energy. We can produce it all here. We don't have to be at all reliant on foreigners. And by the way, under Donald Trump, we were not reliant on foreigners. And now we are again. Thank you, Joe Biden. Thank you for giving money to the Iranians. Thank you for giving money to the Chinese. Thank you for giving money to Vladimir Putin. Incidentally, I know we're running out of time on this first segment, but one of the points that Donald Trump made in the debate against Joe Biden was that Putin never would have even gone into the Ukraine if he had still been president, if Trump had still been president. It wasn't until Biden became president that he went in. Now, why do you think that is? Why do you think that he went in after Trump lost? Because he had the money to do it, because Joe Biden and his green friends have just been dismantling our energy. We should be producing 3 million more barrels a day at $80 a barrel. That's almost $250 million a day we're losing as a country because of this crazy war on American energy. He wants to go to net zero. The other thing he wants to do, I want you all to keep your eyes open on this. If you can vote for whoever you want, it's your choice. But if you vote for Joe Biden, he is going to get rid of your gas car. You're not going to be available. If you have a gas car, he's not going to allow you to keep it. He's not going to allow it within 10 years the auto manufacturers to make gas-powered cars. He wants everything to be electric. By the way, Fisker went bankrupt. You may have seen that. They were the big new electric car company. General Motors, Ford, they're losing $40,000 for every electric car they make. The people don't want electric cars, and Joe Biden's going to tell you what kind of car you can buy. I'm sorry, I have a big problem with that. As I said, I want government to stay in its lane and not tell me whether I can have an air conditioner, what I can set my thermostat at, what kind of light bulbs I can use, and what kind of car I can drive. And incidentally, eventually they want to get everybody out of cars. They want everybody on buses and trains so they can keep track of where we are. That is kind of a Soviet model. And it's all because we have to do this to save the planet. These are the people, by the way, they can't fix the potholes. They can't get control of the border. They can't balance the budget. They can't teach our kids, and they're going to change the temperature of the planet. Really? Is there anyone out there who actually believes that? We're going to take a quick break, folks. I'll be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. I am still waiting very patiently for one of my Democratic friends to call in and let us know why you think that Biden is better on the economy than Trump. We haven't had even one heroic, courageous Democrat to call in and explain this to us, and I'm all ears. I want to hear it because I don't think that you have much of a stone to stand on, but I want to hear your opinion. One of the guys I want to ask this question to is my friend Norm Champ, who is a former member of the Securities Exchange Commission. He's an expert on the regulatory burden that is put on this country, which is something we talk about every single week on this show. Norm, there's a new study out by my friend at University of Chicago, who is basically saying that Casey Mulligan, he's saying that the average cost of regulations per family due to the increase in regulations under Joe Biden is $40,000 over their lifetime. And he was also saying, Norm, that the average family saved about $10,000 in lower regulatory costs when Trump was president. Norm, thanks for joining. What do you make of that?
Great to be here, Steve. Thanks for having me. This regulation is crushing the U.S. economy.
Yep.
It's crushing the U.S. capital markets. Yep. And I would venture a guess that 40,000 is based on the Biden administration's estimate of the cost of those regulations itself. Those costs always come in low, right? So the actual.
Well, let me just, Norm, this was based on some of the cost benefit analysis that has been done. Some of it comes from the government, some comes from outside sources. So I just want to be fair here. Some of it may be on some of these other outside groups and a lot of them, by the way, have to do with, some of these regulations on cars, for example, the emissions controls and so on that are so tight. But even if it's $40,000, that's a lot.
It's a lot. And when you think about the fact that most, a good percentage of American families cannot withstand unexpected car repair and unexpected expense, and then you're going to put that kind of burden on them. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what it does to working families and families in this country.
So in the area that you're the expert on, by the way, I want to ask this question to you before I forget, because I've been asking all the listeners to this and the guests I've had on today. Trump versus Biden on the economy, who do you think's done a better job?
It's not even close, right? The growth under President Trump, the opportunity that growth gives, right? It's not growth for growth's sake. It's growth so that all boats rise. And, not that government picks, we want to have the green thing or do this electric car. It's that growth that drove President Trump's great economic numbers for all Americans, and including Americans who had traditionally been left behind. Everyone did better in that growth economy, and we now see what an anti-growth economy produces.
So you couldn't agree more. And so you, one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, and I appreciate you coming on a Saturday afternoon, is that you are an expert on IPOs and what's going on with the stock market. And you and I were discussing privately the other day, and I said, I got to get you on the show to talk about this. You were saying that there's been a dramatic reduction in IPOs, that we don't have nearly as many public corporations as we used to. And you said that's a result of the rules and regulations that are really inhibiting the ability for private companies to go public.
And for them to make their shares available to all Americans, right? One of the beauties of public capital markets is that those shares can be bought by anyone. And in this world where all non-government employees rely on 401ks and IRAs for their retirement savings, right? Those plans generally invest in liquid stocks, and so liquid securities, and they generally invest in stocks. And so this regulatory burden that has drastically reduced the number of public companies, I am very concerned about, because I think it is crowding all of our retirement savings into very few stocks. And I really worry if we get some kind of shock, war, terrorist attack, something, what's going to happen to all of us crowded into those stocks.
Well, I saw some statistics, Norm, and you follow these things much more closely than I do. But, if you just look at NVIDIA and Google and Apple and a few other, what they used to call the Magnificent Seven, they account for, more than half of the gains in the stock market. So, if something happens to those, I'm proud that we bought NVIDIA about a year and a half ago. We've had a 10-fold increase in our valuation. But, something goes south on these companies, the whole market is going to be really negatively affected, and so will people's 401k plans.
And think about the S&P 500. The Magnificent Seven, as you said, approximately 30% of the market value of the S&P 500. So seven stocks
wow.
are 30% of the market value, and 493 account for the rest.
Wow.
And it's part of a larger story, right? So 1996, we had 8,000 U.S. public companies. We're down now to around 4,000. So we've cut it in half.
So we've cut the number in half?
In half. So we have cut the number of public companies in half. Now, some of that is from mergers. There's no question. Obviously that does happen.
Right.
But the other side of mergers is where policy matters, which is, sure, companies merge to become one, but we also need an inflow of new companies that are offering their securities to the market. So you think about that towards the end of the Trump administration, so 21 after the president left, but while his policies were still in effect, there were over 1,000 initial public offerings in 2021 in the United States. In 2022, that dropped to 181. So 1,035 down to 181. 2023, even worse, 154. So we're not getting the supply back in because private companies do not want to become public companies. It's extremely expensive. They have to have all this mandated disclosure on political topics like conflict minerals, ESG, et cetera. If they get that disclosure wrong, they get sued in strike suits. And if things really go wrong, they get to meet Elizabeth Warren on the Senate Finance Committee floor where she accuses them of corporate greed, right? So it's no one wants to go public, and that's a risk to all of our retirement.
So I'm hoping that you might be the next SEC chairman if Donald Trump wins. You've got the experience and the know-how, and you've been at the SEC. But if you were running the SEC and you were working with Donald Trump, who I think will be the next president, what would you tell him to do to make sure that we have a vibrant public market?
I think that, if I was so fortunate enough that the president would ask me, what I would say is we have got to reduce this burden on companies that go public. So,
give us an example of what you're talking about. I mean, what kind of burdens are you talking about?
So recently, the SEC proposed that every company out there would have to make disclosure concerning its efforts in ESG, environmental,
are you
social,
serious?
and government.
Yes,
I'm serious.
Oh, my God. That's outrageous.
It is, exactly. And so if I tell...
So this, by the way, just because I want to make sure our listeners know, I think most of you know that ESG is these crazy green, climate change initiatives. It's kind of racial preferences. How many gays do you have? How many women do you have? How many blacks do you have? How many Hispanics? Blah, 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 blah. How many, transgender bathrooms do you have? I mean, this is stuff that's very invasive and very expensive for companies.
And if you tell all U.S. companies to make disclosure on any topic. So prior to this, they had conflict minerals. To your point about energy, extractive industries, if you drilled for oil. If you make all companies make these disclosures, some of them are going to get it wrong. They're going to get sued, and then that costs them a lot of money because they basically have to settle those lawsuits. So we need to peel back these constant additions to disclosure. And you think about it, in this country, in the growth of the public capital markets, we use the materiality standard forever. companies have to disclose everything material. And that's something different in 1950 than it was in 1975 than it is now, right? Mm-hmm. But if you mandate disclosure on certain areas, then that whole materiality point goes out the window, and companies can be sued for getting it wrong. And it's really hurting.
Trial lawyers are going to have a field day here going after these companies on a lot of these ESG initiatives, right?
100%. And to think about sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that, I was thinking when you were describing this, and I'm horrified by this, that, I just had a couple of meetings with some, people run, medium-sized manufacturing firms, and they were telling me that now there's these, and I don't know if this comes from the SEC or the EPA. I mean, there's so many of these alphabet soup agencies, but it wasn't the government that was requiring them to comply with all of these disclosures. It was the people they were doing, the companies they were doing business with, because apparently like if you're General Motors, you have to make sure that all the companies you do business with are also complying with this stuff.
Exactly. So they sort of, right, it's like a transitive property. They say, well, not only you, public company, but also the people you deal with. And so
that's unbelievable.
Here's a great statistic for you, Steve. There is an index of smaller companies called the Wilshire 5000 Index, right? And that's companies that would be on the earlier stages, right? Well, although they have not renamed the index is down to 3,381 companies.
Yeah, wow.
So
that's amazing.
The Wilshire 5000 is no longer the Wilshire 5000, and that's the
now. Is there any? Is it possible? This is something that I'm not an expert at, and you are, and that's why I'm having you on. But could you register in some other country so that you don't have to comply with these mandates?
I think that London and Hong Kong are our main competitors for listings.
Right.
Some, other countries have tried to kind of open up. Here's another great statistic. 70% of world stock value is U.S. companies.
Yes.
But it's
Wait,
only
say that
10%.
Again? Did you say 70%?
70% of the whole world stock value is U.S. However, for number of companies, we are only 10% of that.
Wow.
So we're shrinking, we're concentrating. And I would say, I do think, and the SEC does do this, or at least in my day they did, the SEC does go out to other countries, friendly allies of America, and try to encourage markets and try to encourage growth of markets. And we should do that as well, right? We should encourage other countries to start stock markets or have healthy stock markets. There are very few countries with healthy stock markets that also are dictatorships, right? Generally, healthy stock markets mean freedom and they mean democracy. And so it's, that's something we should encourage. But I'm not sure those markets are much better, as these regulators kind of coordinate their efforts. I would hope that we would cut back on all this regulation, cut back on these mandated disclosures, and, by the way, restore normal order for initial public offerings. Another thing they did was they scrapped all the timetables and all the reviews and made it very discretionary, and that's discouraged many companies. That's something that can be fixed day one. Just restore regular process.
Norm, that's way, way, way too commonsensical for Washington. But I think we're going to see some change if we get Donald Trump in, because Trump is not a hyper regulator as Joe Biden is. Folks, that's Norm Champ, who is an expert on securities law, who worked at the Securities and Exchange Commission. He's my choice to be the next SEC chairman to clean up this mess in Washington. Thanks for joining. Thanks, Norm.
Thank you, Steve. Great to be here.
Folks, we'll be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
This is 77 WABC Newsroom Extra.
MTA Chair and CEO Janno Lieber says the crackdown on ghost plates has led to hundreds of arrests and the impounding of well over 1,000 vehicles so far this year.
Arrested 338 toll-dodging drivers. We've impounded 1,500 vehicles who together owed almost $13 million.
They've also issued around 12,000 summonses. Lieber says toll evaders are taking money out of your pocket.
That's the bottom line here. This is about fairness and making sure that New Yorkers don't get stuck with the bills that the deadbeats won't pay. It's your money that they are taking, and we're not going to let it happen. $50 million a year, we're going to get every dollar.
The most recent crackdowns on fake or covered plates were held at the Midtown Tunnel, the Williamsburg, RFK, and Bronx Whitestone bridges. I'm Lisa Ritchie, 77 WABC News.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. We've been having a lot of fun this afternoon about who is the better president on the economy. Is it Rand Paul? Is it Joe Biden or is it Donald Trump? And so far, we have not gotten a single caller to defend the record for Joe Biden. One of the guys who I think I know the answer to this question is Hogan Diddley, who's a great friend, and he was an amazing press secretary for Donald Trump in the first term. I hope he is the press secretary for Donald Trump in the second term. Hogan, you've been amazing. You are now also with the America First Policy Institute, where I do some work as well. Appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your busy afternoon, Hogan. I was trying to reach Hogan. I know we have him on the line. Let me know, Mr. Producer, when we get him on. But Hogan has just been a real hero of mine. And it's not easy taking on the media the way that he has done so brilliantly over the years. But do we have Hogan on? I guess we might have lost Hogan. So, folks, I will see what's going on there. I mean, I have a slight technical difficulty. But in the meantime, we will take do we have any callers waiting? If not, what we will. Okay. So we're going to take a quick break. We have Rand Paul coming up. Sorry for the technical difficulty, folks. We'll be right back.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. While we try to get back Hogan, and the problem is not with Hogan, it's with us. We had some phone issues in the studio, but we'll try to get that fixed. In the meantime, I'm going to answer my own question that we've been talking about for the last couple hours on the show. Who's better on the economy, Trump or Biden? And I mention this because in the Wall Street Journal today, big front page story about all of these economists are saying, oh, Trump is going to be much worse for the economy than Biden. These economists might want to get their head out of the sand and look what's happening in the real world. So we have put together a chart book at Committee to Unleash Prosperity, just comparing, just side by side, what happened to Trump and what happened under Biden. I'm just going to quickly go through these while we try to get our phone problems fixed. Okay, let's look at the most important statistic of all. Household income. What happened to household income? Well, according to the Census Bureau, under Donald Trump, real household income went up by almost $6,000 when Trump was in office. Under Biden, that same number, negative $2,500. That's just one example. All right, I think we've got Hogan on. Hogan, are you there?
I am, Steve. How's it going?
I am so sorry about those phone problems. I was telling people that you're a national hero to get in front of the press and defend Donald Trump. That must be quite an interesting experience.
Well, first of all, it's probably big tech censorship trying to keep us off the air. What's happening here with your phone system, I can already tell. But seriously, we always used to, in a good way, myself and a lot of the press team would refer to you and Larry as the good news group, because you guys got to go out every day talking about the economy, and it was always good news. We had to deal with
our job was easy.
I know.
Look at all the. I used to joke to President Trump. I used to say, "Mr. President, stop creating so many jobs. We don't have enough people to fill all the jobs."
That's exactly right. And your question is so interesting because the people out there feel the brunt of the bad policies from Joe Biden. Are you paying more for gas and groceries? You are. Is your economy personally at your own house worse than it was before? Sure. You're paying more for interest rates, car payments, house payments, rent payments. Everything is going up. And I love how Joe Biden looks around as if all of these things are just happening to him. They're happening because of him. It's his policies that got us here. And one of the seminal moments in that debate a couple weeks ago, as you know, debates are about making moments and turning a moment into momentum and ultimately a movement and using that to win an election. One of the moments there was when Joe Biden said the inflation was hurting the black community. And Donald Trump looked at him and said, "You caused the inflation, Joe."
Exactly.
It was brilliant.
Yeah. So, Hogan, since we have a bit of an abbreviated session today because of those phone problems, I want to ask you about I started the show by saying how I think there's a conspiracy going on in the media, and I want your reaction to this because you dealt with the media every day, especially the White House press corps. It's my hypothesis, and I think it's shown in fact, that the media knew all along that even 4 years ago that Joe Biden was really not mentally fit to be president. And it was, in my opinion, one of the greatest and most sinister cover-ups in American history. It makes Watergate look like a second-grade burglary. And these media people covered it up for 4 years. In the last year, when it was quite evident that Joe Biden was losing his mental faculties, and I'm not saying this to be disparaging. We all get older, and as you get older, I don't have the energy or the mental capacity that I did 20 years ago. It was a cover up, and nobody in the media spoke up about it. And it wasn't until Joe Biden went in front of 100 million Americans, and Americans could see for themselves that the president, unfortunately, doesn't have the mental faculties to be president. It wasn't until then that they turned on him. And I just want your reaction to that, because it makes me so angry that we don't have a media that we can trust.
We don't. And there's a reason that the popularity of the media sits somewhere between Congress and COVID, because they've been lying to us for years in this country. And this is a great example. I mean, you're telling me, oh my gosh, Joe Biden's old? He can't get through sentences? He meanders and wanders off and stares slack-jawed into the distance. Wait till the media finds out he actually has shady business dealings, or that the Hunter Biden laptop is real, or that Russia's a hoax. I mean, time and time again, they have shown their hand here, and you're absolutely right. It's coordinated and it's calculated. And what that debate did, it stripped all the veneer off. And now they're basically out publicly saying, listen, we covered for this guy for decades. We carried his water for the last 4 years. This is a bridge too far. And what they're doing now is not good journalism. I mean, they're just stating the obvious. He's old. The fact they covered it up and knew about it for years, and now the stories are coming out that they did know about it for years, is a real problem. But more than that, now it's just open, rampant bias saying, hey, Biden can't win the election.
Exactly.
So we are going to do everything we can in our power to put pressure on him to remove him. So we're going to collude with Democrats to get somebody in who can win. When in our nation's history have we said, the polls are down, let's just switch horses. Let's just change it, right? And we'll get the media to come right along and say how we should do this too. Yeah. I mean, it is just rampant bias. So obvious.
It is.
It's just so old. They're so tired at this point. It's really frustrating.
You're making the point that I was making, that, look, I believe, Hogan, that if Biden were up by 10 points in the polls right now, they would just keep covering it up. Oh, this is fine. Joe Biden is fine. It wasn't 100%. Until the media finally realized, wait a minute, this guy can't get elected. Oh my God, we have to find someone else. Now, and these are the same people who say that we have to have a democratic process. Well, Joe Biden was democratically elected by the Democratic voters, and now they want to throw him over the side of the boat.
Absolutely right. They don't care about the threat to democracy. In fact, they're going to rue the day they even brought that up, because NPR actually showed polling where it said the real threat to democracy by NPR listeners. Basically people on the left say it's really Joe Biden could be the bigger threat as it relates to the numbers. Listen, we have a serious problem in this country. We all know that Joe Biden is frail and that he's fragile and that he's feeble. That's okay, whatever. The problem is, even when he's lucid, he makes horrible decisions for the Americans.
That's true.
The southern border is wide open on purpose. That's not by accident. It's by design. He caused the inflation. We have wars breaking out all over the world. We have crime spiking in our city streets. So even his decisions he thinks are good end up being bad. The fact that he's frail and he can't get through sentences, that just invites danger on the international stage. China's mobilizing like never before. We're not feared. We're not respected at this point in time because this president has failed on every single front.
Yeah, I think you're making a really important point, Hogan. By the way, I apologize. We have to take a break.
Right.
I appreciate. Can you come on again in a couple of weeks? I mean, I love having you on, Hogan. But you're so right. I want Republicans to be attacking Biden not because of his mental condition, because of his policies that have been a disaster for the country.
Yes.
I mean, my God, now it's like, oh well, he's a good president. He's just too old. No, he's been a terrible president. Hogan, thanks so much for joining. We'll be right back, folks, with Rand Paul, my favorite senator, in 1 minute. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
We're back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. Well, we've had a lot of fun this afternoon over the last 2 hours asking our listeners, do you think Biden or Trump has been better on the economy? Not on their mental fitness, not on their social policies, not on foreign policy, not on the military, but who's been better on the economy? And we've kind of done an informal poll of our callers, and it's been something like 25-0. I couldn't find one caller, not one, who would come in and defend Joe Biden's record. Maybe I should have brought in some of the Wall Street Journal reporters, or maybe you should have brought in somebody from the New York Times or the Washington Post. The only people who will defend Joe Biden's record are people who are in the media or people who are in politics who don't really understand the economy. But I was saying earlier, I'm going to make it very simple for you folks. Just this is, I think, what I called game, set, and match for Trump. If you look at what has happened to the incomes of the average Americans, they have lost $2,100 in purchasing power. They are poor today because of Biden's runaway spending, because of the fact that the border is out of control, the fact that he is regulated like no president has ever done before. And I want to go back to this point I made with Hogan Diddley, and I was so appreciative of him coming on. And by the way, I apologize we couldn't get Rand Paul on the line. We're going to get him next week, I promise. He's my favorite senator. And but here is the point. Do you really want 4 more years of this? Do you, even if you're a Democrat, do you really want 4 more years of these policies that have sent prices through the roof, that have let our border become a sieve, that have basically caused crime in our cities? Campuses are a mess. We have hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of student loan, quote, forgiveness for deadbeats that won't pay their loans that you and I have to repay. We have a national debt that is closing in on $40 trillion. Now, I'm going to blame the Republicans and the Democrats on that. I don't think any single party is responsible. But Joe Biden came in a debt crisis, and he poured kerosene on the fire. He added $3 or $4 trillion. And look at his record, folks. He is now saying if he is reelected, he's going to add another $2 trillion to our debt on top of the debt that we already have. If you want to vote for that, folks, I think it's going to be the ruination of the country, but that's one man's opinion. Folks, we are at the end of the show. This has been the WABC More Money Show. Thanks for listening, and have a great weekend.
Ryan Payne and Bob Payne back again on the More Money Show from Payne Capital Management. Of course, that's Payne, talking about the markets, the economy, and your retirement.
Yeah, guys, it's pretty amazing. Here we are, July of 24. And this big booming bull market really got started in October of 2022. And you would think it's just been a straight line based on the lack of volatility recently. But what happened was from October of 2022, we had a big rally that peaked in July, right? That following July. And then we had this quick and painful 10% correction in everything. It wasn't just the stock market, it was commodities, bonds, everything went straight down for 3 months. I'll tell you one thing I learned over my 50 years, almost 50 years next year, is that clients can handle anything. They can't handle a down statement for 3 months in a row.
You're right. I mean, it's like whenever this market goes sideways for like 12 months, it feels like an eternity. And Chris, I remember we had a lot of clients asking us about all these different fancy structured products they could put their money in. They get some of the upside of the market, but they get none of the downside, and all these exotic products because there's nothing happening in their portfolios. And that was right before we had this massive rally in the stock market.
Well, he always says it gets the darkest before the dawn. And it's when a client says, hey, we need to start getting more creative, that's a good sign that the market's probably going up pretty soon.
Well, it's incredible because I came across this presentation on my desktop, and it was October 31st, 2023. And the only reason we do these fireside chats is when, the cry from our clients is so severe, right? The pain that they're suffering is so horrible that they have to hear from, in a conference call. And it was just amazing. How much sentiment can swing how you feel about your portfolio, your emotions, how much they drive what you do as an investor.
Well, I think collectively, right? Like the fact that all our clients, investors at the same time come to the same conclusions at the same time. So everyone was feeling the pain at the same time. Hence, we had to come down from the mountain, Bob, and do our webinar.
Well, you know what? You guys always come in like superheroes and do those fireside chats. But, I really think there's a big misunderstanding about what exactly the market is versus what the market is perceived to be. And, I'll tell you, over the 4th of July weekend, Louise and I went to this Revolutionary War fort in Philadelphia. And we walked in there and, we read all the placards and the signage. And, I really couldn't get a good sense of exactly what the fort was. I had this, this preconceived notion in my brain about what it was. And then the docent came out and explained with a little diorama and some neat little charts exactly what it was. And really was able to simplify it for me. And then when I went back and read all the signage, it made total sense to me. And I think the same thing applies to the market where people think, I've got to buy NVIDIA, or I got to set 100% in cash. The reality is it's somewhere in between.
That's a great point because all of a sudden everyone was so bearish, so nervous about the markets 9 months ago. Now we're getting a lot of pushback like, why don't we own more artificial intelligence? Why don't we own more NVIDIA? So they went from extremely scared about what was going to happen to like, I can't get enough risk. And that's really the tricky part about investing is just how emotions oscillate so quickly between fear and greed.
That's really true, guys. And as I go back through the presentation, look at the different charts and graphs that we presented to our clients, nothing really changed, right? I mean, interest rates were going up, but we said, hey, they're not going to go up forever. We had, earnings estimates were climbing. They had been climbing. Nothing changed there, just the perception that they wouldn't keep climbing. We went through what happens in the market over the course of a year, and inevitably you get pullbacks and corrections, but they're always temporary. So it's amazing how you look at the same data 9 months later and people are crazy bullish. And you look at the same data 9 months earlier and they were crazy bearish. I mean, we literally had to hold people's hands. We had to almost, lock them down to keep them from liquidating their whole portfolio out of fear.
You know what it kind of reminds me of? It's like when you go to the arcade and you play pinball. I mean, that ball is like hitting the sides, like you're hitting the flappers, like you're doing anything you can to prevent it from going into that little pocket. But you know what happens inevitably? The ball goes in the pocket and you lose.
Well, you take NVIDIA. Yeah, it's a great stock, right? It's $3 trillion. I mean, it's amazing, the valuation of that company. But let's face it, it's a semiconductor stock. It's a cyclical, right? And they haven't repealed, the cyclicality of the business. I mean, it's built from silica, right? So as you said in your notes this week, Rye, this move is basically built on sand.
And as they say, castles made of sand fall into the sea. Eventually. Another 70s rock quote, by the way. Actually, it's late 60s, Jimi Hendrix. But that's actually a great point. It's just you understand why investors typically underperform longer term. And I think, the mentality is like we've got this hot market right now is I got to get all that upside while it's here. And what we've learned in our, collective 75 years, as we always say on the show, is it's not really about getting all the upside. It's not getting creamed on the downside. And, that's the problem with semiconductor stocks and growth stocks in general, which actually underperform over time, is because the downturns are horrific.
Well, and the other thing is no one ever wants to be accused of being greedy or jealous, right? Nobody ever wants to feel that way. But that's all it is. I mean, we're having a market right now, which is a phenomenal market. The average stock is up 4 to 6%. That's, guys, that's 8 to 10% annualized. The historical rate of return on the stock market is 8 to 10%. So you're getting a really fantastic return so far this year. It just pales in comparison when you look at something up 250%. So if you feel that way, you're not happy with your portfolio, I'm sorry, but you're being a little jealous right now, a little greedy. Take a look in the mirror.
Yeah. Well, you know what, that's a great point about greedy or jealous. Every time I hear a client say, "Hey, I talked to a friend of mine at a party, I put my flak jacket on because I know it's coming next."
Yeah, but Chris, you know what? As an investor, right? I'm so happy that, our large growth portfolio is up 27%. Makes me very happy. But, as a financial advisor, a financial planner, I'm not going to put all your money in one portfolio that's benefiting from 7 stocks that are going through the roof. I'm just never going to do it.
Well, and the problem is too, it's like for most of us, if we've saved and we have a sizable portfolio, it's like if your portfolio goes up 40% in the next couple of months, it's probably not going to change your life. But the downside risk you have with that is your portfolio get cut in half. Is it worth that risk? Meanwhile, if you just stay diversified in a boring long-term portfolio, you're going to double your money over the next 10 years. And you're probably going to be more than set for life by just sticking to a strategy. So it's kind of like, it's not worth getting that extra return for the risk that you may take on the downside, because you can afford all the upside. But if you get a horrific market here at some point, that could derail your whole retirement and ruin your lifestyle long-term. And I think that's what most of us don't grasp right now, especially if we're overweighted in that hot portfolio.
And that's a great point about this whole tipping point session this week. We're looking at a presentation that we did 9 months ago because the average investor couldn't handle a 10% decline. Why? Because it creates uncertainty. And when you have uncertainty is when you get emotional and you react. So a 10% decline drove most people crazy. Can you imagine what 40, 50% would do to you? Don't put yourself in that position.
If you saved over $1 million for your retirement, myself and Bob and our team at Payne Capital will run for you our total financial master plan, and we'll do that with no obligation or cost. It's a full holistic review. We literally look at everything. There's not a firm out there that will do this work up front. We go as far as building you your own personalized financial portal. We give you a bird's eye view of your entire financial life, and we'll hone in on every financial issue you need to address today, whether it's that income plan for retirement. How do you take Social Security? There's a lot of ways to take it, but one right way for you. How do you draw from your portfolio the most tax-efficient way? We'll give you a full income plan, factor in inflation so you don't run out of money. We're going to look at diversification. Markets have been all over the place, up and down. Has your portfolio been extremely volatile? Or have you been sitting in cash? Paralysis by analysis, can't figure out what to do. We'll put together a full diversified investment game plan, show you how to grow your wealth, tie it to your goals, but most importantly, protect it over the rest of your life. And we're going to look at fees and taxes. Wall Street loves to sell you high cost, tax inefficient products, whether it's an annuity, mutual fund, insurance product, brokerage product. We're going to go through every investment you have, deep dive. We're going to show you how to reduce all the internal cost and optimize your portfolio for taxes. It's not what you make, it's what you take. You'll get our full tax playbook. We literally have 4 slots left. If you saved over $1 million for your retirement, all you need to do is call or text at 844-752-6692. That's 844-752-6692. If you call or text us right now at 844-752-6692, that's 844-PLAN-NYC at 844-752-6692.
There was a time when summer surprised us, when galleries opened minds, adventures opened hearts, and we all remained open to whatever the day might offer. It was a time to enjoy. It was summer, this summer, at Biltmore. Plan your visit or overnight stay so you can enjoy the marvelous works of Chihuly and savor the season. Reserve now at Biltmore.com.